Okay, there we go.
Okay, we're all set. We're good. So what I would like to do is introductions, please, to start with, and I'll just go through the screen. Jenny, seeing how you're on my left top hand corner and you were on earlier. Let's start with you, Jenny, please.
Thanks, Bob. I'm Jenny Brown. I'm the General Manager of Community Services with the ACRD.
And I'm Bob Beckett, and I'm the Area A Director for the ACRD, and I am chairing this committee as well. And John Jack.
My name is John Jack. I'm the Chief Counselor for the Hooyet First Nations. I'm also its director on the board, and incidentally, I'm also the chair of the board, but not here. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks, John. John Mass.
I'm a resident in Bamfield for 30 years and a volunteer for this committee. Used to be on the water board and also chairing the APC.
Thanks, John. Patrick Schmidt, welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm Patrick Schmidt. I'm the CEO of the Hooyet Group of Businesses, who are one of the assets they have in their fold is the e-stock.
Thank you. And you'll be speaking to us very, very shortly. Moira Coates.
Good evening, Uvklama Mariah Coots. I'm from the Hutuxet Tribe Government. I am the Director of Lands and the Executive of Lands and Resources for UTG, and I'm also a board member for the ACRD as well.
Thank you. And Moira, the background, Aurora Bora, was that a picture that you took in your particular territory?
Not quite my territory, no. Just in town in Port Alberni here. So this would be the Sisseton and Huiquechesset, their lands.
Beautiful. Christine Grumman, please.
I'm Christine Grumman. I am a Bamfield resident and volunteer in the community. I've been here for the last 10 years solid and several years before that in and out, and happy to be on the committee and supporting the work that we do. Thank you, Christine. Lisa, please.
Hello, I'm Lisa. Bye. I am a Bamfield volunteer and was previously on the Bamfield Water Board, and I'm happy to have been asked to sit on this board as well.
Thank you, Lisa. My alternate friend and neighbor, Bob Schmidt. And you're still muted. There we go.
Good evening, Bob Schmidt. I'm a full-time Bamfield resident and on this board as a volunteer.
Thanks, Bob. Cynthia?
Oh, the sun is too. Good evening, everyone. My apologies for that earlier. My first time having to start the live stream and the Zoom. So Cynthia Dick, General Manager of Administrative Services, and I am just going to have my camera off because I don't have the best reception, and I will be taking the minutes as well.
Thanks, Cynthia. No apologies necessary. Just be thankful that I wasn't responsible for trying to get this up and running. We'd never get going. Brandon Powers, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Powers. I'm a civil engineer with Great Pacific Consulting, and I have the pleasure to speak with you today in a few moments about the West Bamfield submarine water main.
Thanks, Brandon. Look forward to it, especially given the recent leak that I understand we've just experienced. Cynthia, please. Oh, we've already had Cynthia, so let's go to Paulo, please.
Good evening, everybody. Paulo Weichelberger, Solid Waste Manager for the ACRD.
And we'll be having a report from Paulo shortly. And Eddie.
Hi, everybody. Eddie Kunderman, Operations Manager with the ACRD.
Thanks, Eddie. I think, Jenny, from my screen, we've covered all the introductions. Yes, I've got a thumbs up for that. So we'll move to item number 2, approval of the agenda. And you've had a chance to take a look at the agenda. I assume there is no late items to be added at this point unless someone raises their hand or staff can advise me different. Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Christine and seconded by John Mass. All in favor? And that is approved and moved. Thank you very much. Item number 3, declaration. Are there any declarations, conflict of interest? Seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, the minutes from the April 16th meeting. And could I have someone move the motion that the minutes of the Bamfield Area Services Committee meeting held on April 16th, 2024 be adopted? Moved by John Jack and seconded by Moira Coots. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you very much. Now we get into the meat of the meeting tonight. Section or item number 5, petitions, delegations, and presentations. And we do have a 10-minute maximum. However, if you do need more time, we can, as a committee, agree to provide additional time. So item number 5A is Hawaiian Group of Business, Chief Executive Officer Patrick Schmidt, and he'll be talking about the request for public garbage pickup on the East Dock. So I'll turn it over to you, Patrick. Thank you for attending this evening.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I get concise. The Hawaii pre-treaty acquired the East Dock under a program with the Coast Guard, and with that acquisition, they had to put it into
Patrick, we're not, sorry, Patrick, I'm going to get you to back up. We missed that part. We missed a good portion of that. So something about it was brought in by the Coast Guard in cooperation with the Coast Guard, and then it kind of, for me, it went completely blank.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my video just to try to increase the bandwidth, if that's okay with everyone.
You betcha. Thank you.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Is that good?
Yes, that's excellent.
Okay. The Hawaii acquired the East Dock from the Coast Guard under a Coast Guard program in 2009, so pre-treaty. And they needed a corporation to put it in, and they had the Fishers Corporation in place at the time. When they acquired it, they fund of money to maintain the dock that lasted. We actually had it last quite a bit longer than the original goal in terms of time, and that was able to pay for the power and the garbage and things like that around the dock. And in that time, the dock behaves as kind of a half private dock with the Hawaii Fishers and a half public dock where the water taxis, and it's the main kind of route to West Bamfield with the water taxis. What has happened with tourism, up until now, tourism has not been, hasn't exploded, and we've had a little bit of garbage down there, and we had the fund to maintain that. But now we're seeing more and more as garbage builds up down there, it's becoming more of an economic burden to the business. I understand on the west side, they have a similar issue and they get a pickup from the Francis Barkley. And what I was hoping is, given these tourists that are going to the west side, we don't receive any compensation from them. They jump on the water taxi and go back and forth, but we end up with some of the garbage. As a result, I was hoping there'd be some consideration to have a bin put at the top of the, for the tourists, basically, to be able to put their garbage going forward. I don't know if there's questions, but that's my only pitch.
Thank you, Patrick, for that. I'll open it up for questions, and obviously we have staff here as well that can provide information. So, Jenny, does staff want to kind of springboard from that with comments, or should we just go to the committee members for questions?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this, and Paula, please jump in. Patrick approached staff, and so we said, I think that this would be something that would be appropriate to take to this committee meeting. There are cost implications for any expansion of service, which this would be. And right now, the solid waste service for Bamfield is majority tax paid, so that would be taxes for the community of Bamfield. How you may know or not know how garbage is managed, but we have bins for the community to use that are at the transfer station, and they're in a fenced bear-proof area. And we have garbage collection weekly in the summer and bi-weekly or monthly in the winter. We do have some bins around town, but those bins are actually located at places that are paid for by businesses, and then we sub-bill to those businesses. And they're responsible for those bins. And so essentially those are being paid for by themselves. And on the west side, because we don't have an east side, we don't have a transfer station, the west side dock acts as the transfer station for all the garbage for the residents on the west side. And again, that is collected and we take it off in the Lady Rose, and the cost is collected through taxation. So the addition of a bin, if we put a bin somewhere near the east dock, would have a cost for an additional bin, which we're now purchasing those bins. So there's the capital cost, the maintenance costs. And the other thing that we struggle with, like even in Anakla, we see the bear-proof bins is we can try to get a good bin, but I would be concerned, and maybe Paula, you can speak to that more on how well our new bear bins are going to be, and maybe that'll be a reduced concern, but that's something that we always need to keep in mind as those bear-proofing of bins. Paula, was there anything else that I might have missed just for the committee to keep in mind when considering this?
I think you covered the bulk of it there, Jenny. As mentioned, we are in the process of purchasing new bins, bear-resistant bins that will look and act exactly the same way, no matter where they are within the community. There may be the opportunity to add that in with the option of running through the sub-billing process, much like we had with the other businesses. But yeah, that ultimately is the gist of it.
Perfect, thank you. Then let me encourage some dialogue discussion with our committee members. Let me jump. Well, no, I'm not going to jump in because Christine got her hand up just in time. Go ahead, Christine.
Got you, Bob. Questions all the time. So I would be curious. I definitely, we want good waste management throughout the community, obviously. But one of the things that I'd be curious about is to understand how much the waste that's happening at the dock there is truly from tourists taking water taxis and heading over versus folks that are using the dock. I think there's several different potential sources, and so we just want to characterize that problem accurately when trying to decide where it is that funds should come from. I know east side is probably similar to west side, that there's lots of folks that boat into Bamfield from elsewhere and then bring all their trash off their boat and dump it wherever they are, and that's not all, I think, folks that are just coming right across.
That's a great comment. And I see, Bob, you'll be next. I think one of the things that I would be querying is, Patrick, is there some ability to consider sharing the cost given the Hawaiian fishery function, as well as, and I appreciate the fact that there is a public moorage function, which is so desperately needed. But, based on what Christine said, is how do we break that down? And what about the taxis and their contribution, invaluable service, but some sense of responsibility given the traffic and perhaps the garbage. And if you don't have to answer right now, why don't we go to Bob and see what he has to say, and then we'll come back to you, Patrick, after you hear some of these questions and comments and share your thoughts. So, Bob.
Yeah, it's hard to have much of an opinion without kind of knowing the traffic and the source of the garbage to a certain degree. I do question whether there's a lot of people on the east side using that just because we have the transfer bins, and residents on the west side have their transfer bin. So it would seem that most of the garbage is probably from tourism or people using the dock itself. So where that cost should be allocated, I guess, is open to debate. But, we on the east side are paying for the transfer bins, and people on the west side are paying for their transfer bins. So to put another one that isn't really benefiting residents, other than the important fact that it'll, obviously mitigate the garbage issue. I wonder if there's other sources, whether through mortgage fees and or through, tourism. Should, some of the lodges, et cetera, the benefit from tourism be paying a contribution towards a service such as that? So I just throw that out for discussion, not knowing what the cost is. Is it a very minor cost or is it a significant cost? But I do question the amount that responsibility should be allocated to the resident taxpayers.
Thank you. I'd also like to mention that, and I know Jenny and staff, I think, would agree that not only do we and should we concern ourselves with garbage, but we should also be encouraging recycling. If that ends up as a site. Speaking of costs, and staff may have to prepare options for this committee, to consider. But shooting from the hip, Paulo, Jenny, what would 2 bins, 1 garbage, 1 recycling be on a monthly basis? And recognizing we're not holding you to it. You mentioned there's a capital cost of the bins, and then there's the dumping. Any idea, a rough idea what we're talking about?
Paulo, go for it.
Yeah, just did some rough calculations, and for a singular bin, give it 2 bins. You're looking at about between 600 to 700 per month if you had just 2 individual bins to start. That's just a rough guess.
And that would be servicing with a truck. And so we just have to confirm with Patrick that the bin location would be able to be serviced with the front end tip, not dock, which would have to be serviced by the Lady Rose, and those costs are significantly higher.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think Bob's comments about, costs, we were, again, 2 years in a row, double-digit taxation. Certainly I've heard from the community their concerns about taxation. Maybe it's time if we can ask Patrick to sum up some thoughts on what he's heard so far.
Sorry, Paulo, I didn't get the number. You were kind of going out. What was the number for 2 bins? Just so.
Sorry, Patrick, let me do that again. We're roughly approximately $600 to $700 per month.
Per month for 2 bins.
Approximately, yes.
Can you get for part of the year, or do you have to get them for the whole year?
It's based on per year. It's based on the whole year, and it's a unit rate per bin per haul, all-inclusive rate. So that's regardless of the time of year, you average out that frequency of pickup. That's what you're looking at per month.
I see. I guess, Bob, I totally acknowledge that the part of the dock, and I don't know the quantums of garbage that come from the 10th to East Dock. We don't run the float house there anymore. That's probably reduced it. And I don't really track the garbage that closely. I know when we arrived before, there'd be large bags that would be overflowing from the little garbage bins that were there. We've actually removed those bins just purposely to try to dissuade people from believing they could just leave their garbage there. My initial thoughts are, I know that there's probably some garbage from the people on Moorage, and I would capture that. I still think that there's some garbage that's coming across, whether it's people who empty their vehicles or something of the sort when they arrive. So it's not usually what you would expect. It may just be people coming in to drop off, and because it is a public dock, and therefore there's a public function to drop off your garbage. So, my initial thought is I have no issue whatsoever trying to quantify what amount comes from the dock as moorage, but I still like to figure out a way to where it's being used as a public dock, be able to offset that against something from the ACRD side or some other source. I mean, I really, it's not for us, it's more problematic because you talk about bears or whatever. And if I have people down there dumping garbage, I don't want to attract it down there. I want a bin. And we are running a program. You can see already at Kingfisher, we've already done the first rehab dock. That next one will be Ostrom's, and this will be the last one. We have wear and tear, obviously, and if we actually charged what it costs for these water taxis to use that dock, it would be problematic. So we're trying to do the best we can. We're looking for some support towards
to Paulo, the fact that there's no bin there gives no options whatsoever. And I don't know if I'm dreaming this, but have I seen at other marinas where there is a pay as you go? So, you have a bin with, it's $2, $5 to throw your garbage in the bin, and it's an automated bin. Am I dreaming this? Is that something that would work? And again, I know that it may, without a bin there, I don't know if people would be prepared to pay to dump it there. But again, trying not to burden either Hawaiian or Bamfield taxpayers. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about pay as you throw in bin. I've seen some of those in Europe. Sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
There's a pay for.
You may have to go off video again, Patrick. You're really hit and miss. While we're waiting for Patrick, go ahead, Paulo, with your Europe.
Apologies.
Go ahead, Patrick. Let's see if.
I was unable to make it what Paulo was saying. That
Patrick, we're not getting any audio from you. Now that
Zach, are you on the Wi-Fi? Tell them to get off if he is.
Paulo, let's go with you, sir.
Sure, I'll give it a start, and then Patrick can jump in. I've seen some of those bin systems in Europe. I don't know what availability would be for something like that. Again, it's something that we'd have to research. It's cost. The simplest way to deal with these things are typically, the bear resistant bins that we're dealing with now. If we switch over to a different system, that'd be something to consider as well. Yeah, but I don't think you're dreaming that. I think that's actually a system that's around. I just haven't seen one that's close by that would be viable. The other consideration, and Patrick somewhat alluded to this, is the payment piece there. There would have to be some kind of a control to pay as you go. I don't know what that would look like offhand.
Before I go to Patrick, I was thinking, Paulo, it would be a debit swipe or something like that. I'll go to Patrick for a comment, and then I'm coming back to you, John Mass.
we've tried, or we've looked at options of, people come pay at the hotel or something like that, but you can't always guarantee people are going to do that. And unfortunately, we end up with the garbage down the dock. So the second part is I don't know what the CapEx would be, something like that. And the reality is during the off season, this isn't an issue. This is really a 3 or 4 month issue when we have a lot of tourism coming through Bamfield. So I don't know if you could carry the weight of that in the winter financially.
Thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Bob. Couple of thoughts on that. The pre-Huayet takeover, there was a dumpster on there, and it was a pay-per-use dumpster that sat on the dock, and you paid so much a small bag, so much a big bag. Most boating public, which we have hundreds of boats coming in, starting in about March, expect to drop their garbage off somewhere. And because on the east side, the bins are on the west dock, much of that garbage comes over to the east dock because there's no room to put bins on the Harbor Authority dock. I think also the fact that the taxis should be paying something, as other people on the dock with moorage should be paying something to use that dock. And I know it's very difficult to pay moorage on the East Government dock. Often the hotel won't call back. There's nobody at the hotel. I've had many people ask me about it, and myself, when we go out overnight, I leave the boat there and I try and pay at the hotel, and it's very, very difficult. I won't even get a call back. I think also this goes a little deeper into the whole community, that we need some sort of taxation on tourism, because this is going to become a massive problem. We've got 4 public toilets, and they are all maintained by Centennial Park, which does get a small tax requisition. I don't see any reason why the taxis aren't paying some kind of fee for the use of that dock. They're not paying at any of the other docks either. Contribution could be done there, contribution with taxes, contribution from the dock facility itself, and also a contribution should be approached, the Harbor Authority should be approached for a contribution, because they have the majority of the long-term boaters that aren't anchored out. And they also have a sign on their dock that says either take it to the East Government dock or take it to the West Government dock, because people can't drop their garbage there. Just some suggestions.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just also curious whether the Francis Barkley is making contribution to use that dock still, which would also account for some tourism dollars.
Thank you. Christine, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Almost. Yeah, there's something that off the bat doesn't quite sit right with me about asking the water taxis to be paying. I'll just let that sit.
I guess just so we can discuss that a little bit further, can I get you to share that rationale, Christine?
Yeah, I guess some of it does come down to, and I know this is, it's a tricky question to get the answer to, but unless we understand that the water taxis and their paying guests are a significant portion of the trash ending up in those bins, I think that it's easy to single them out as businesses that are contributing to traffic there, but I'm not convinced without seeing some data that it's a major source of garbage.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, John.
I would expect the garbage related to the water taxis is less than 5%. The majority comes off boats, and fishing boats, especially the tourist fishing boats, the people who are cruisers, they're usually extremely good about compacting. Most of their organic stuff goes overboard. But I know from being in the business before with accommodation, the garbage that comes off fish boats every day, a garbage bag, and it is all combined: beer cans, pop cans, garbage, fish guts, everything else all goes in there. And that's real common. But I know that the taxis, you can stand there and watch. They're really busy right now. There almost nobody other than a coffee container or a pop can. Nobody's coming off those taxis regularly with a bag of garbage. That's very abnormal. A lot of the things when people come in from the islands, they're packing. Responsible people bring their garbage when they get to Bamfield and they're loading their car. They drop it on the dock for sure. Those are all real common, and I've been associated with all those things. And again, we need, this is only going to compound, but the tourists are also bringing millions of dollars into the community and have been for years. It's a little bit busier this summer, but not much. And the money that's coming in, some percentage of that from all the businesses. We have no business licenses and no ability for any of the businesses to participate on a taxable basis. A bed, a night use, a bed tax. Like most communities that have tourism at this quantity have some sort of ability to collect a 0.5% or 1% from all users. And there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that in Bamfield, even without business licenses. So I do believe it is the responsibility of the dock to take garbage, but in this particular situation, it's a transport dock and there's heavy traffic there. And the big dock at the Harbor Authority can't put a dumpster there. There's no way to take it off. And so it only makes sense that everybody contributes a little bit. And there's no reason we can't have a dumpster there all year round, just like we used to. And there's a pay box on the dock. Before, everybody dropped money in there. But there was at that time, there wasn't always bins on the east side. So people from the east side brought their garbage over and dropped money in there. Or sorry, from the west side, I'm sorry. That's all I've got.
Thanks, John. I'm going to go ahead, Lisa, and then I'm going to just prompt staff to give their thoughts as to how we could move forward. There's been a number of good ideas, and what could we ask staff to do to come back and present to us? So go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to suggest perhaps some better signage regarding our transfer station on the way out of town. We get a lot of questions at the market about where can we leave our garbage, and we direct people to the transfer station. So making that maybe a bit more, I think there might be some already down on the dock, but just perhaps making it clearer or more visible with a map, because a lot of people see the parking lot, the Save Paradise parking, but don't realize that our transfer station is tucked in the back of that. So people with the vehicles that are coming and going would probably take it with them instead of leaving it on the dock.
Great idea. Certainly wouldn't, resolve all of the challenges that, Patrick is experiencing and sharing with us, but, any effort to get folks, motivated to take their stuff there would be great. So, Jenny, Paulo, what are your thoughts?
I can speak to that a bit, Bob. Just so you know, I turned off my video, but I might have been the only one who didn't get assigned co-host because I was already videoed. So, John, if you want to give me co-host, I can turn on my video again. But if the committee would like, we can provide a report. I think I can turn video on now. There we go. We can provide a report with different options. We can provide the detailed costing for this and what that would look like. annually, and then also what that equates to as a taxation. We can provide options that don't look at adding it as a dumpster and other mechanisms for utilizing the East Side transfer station. We can look at signage. These are some of the things we've heard from you guys, as just putting up more signage to encourage people to haul their garbage directly to the East Side transfer station. Those are solutions that we can provide. And then we can also do a follow-up call with Patrick just on other options that we can present back to the committee. So we can do a follow-up report and look at expanded service as an option with other options for the committee, if that is what the committee would like.
Just before I go to Moira, the one thing, if we go, if as a committee, you concur with what Jenny has offered, I would really hope that, and this won't be easy, I don't think, Jenny and Paulo, but John's comments about with increased tourism, we need to take a look at some form of revenue. I hate using the word taxation, but how do we have those that are benefiting? We all benefit by some tourism. How do we get folks to pay that fair share so that the resident perhaps doesn't have to always worry about a trend where we're covering the costs because of increased tourism. So let me go to Moira on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, it's a question for Jenny, I believe, perhaps Paulo as well. In regards to the signage and things like that, just in the mind of cost effectiveness and not wanting to incur more costs for the residents and such, would staff also be able to look into the possibilities of provincial government funding, seeing as it's somewhat of a public education sort of subject matter in that regards? Please correct me if I'm wrong, and that wouldn't quite fall under there, but just kind of food for thought. Thank you, Jim.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. And through the chair, we will look at grant options. Off the top of my head, nothing's clicking specifically for solid waste and education signage. But when we talk about tourism, things like that, I think that is not specific to solid waste. It's a broader conversation, and I'm not exactly sure what research needs to start to happen on that to look at what the options are for Bamfield and how to tackle those. But I will personally just take that back to discuss at the organization to see if there is other regional districts, other services where this is a situation. Like we have Ucluelet and Tofino and the West Coast, where also has a lot of tourism impacts. They receive resort municipality funding, but this is an electoral area. And so I know that funding isn't available. So I'll do a little digging and asking about that, because I suspect regardless, it's probably going to come up again and again. So we might find something and some different options to look at for trying to solve that as it builds for the future.
Thanks, Jenny. And certainly it's a question that we can pose to Minister Osborne, who will be in our community on August 29th at 5:30 p.m. At the Bamfield Marine Sciences Center for a public open house for questions and answers. And again, being our local MLA and having the experience she's had as mayor in Tofino, John's thoughts about revenue associated with tourism for offsetting taxation would be hopefully in her wheelhouse. Jenny, do you need a motion from the committee, or is it simply we would like to go ahead with having staff working with Patrick come back with a report for our next meeting?
Yeah, if the committee wants to pass a resolution to direct staff to do a report to investigate expansion of service, that would be good.
Okay, John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, my concern is there is garbage getting dropped on the dock every day. The birds are ripping it up. It looks horrible at the best of times. What are we going to do in the meantime, at least for the next couple of months? Can we get a dumpster there? Like it's now that the bin has been taken away, and I understand why it's been taken away, people are still walking up the ramp and dropping their bag at the top of the ramp, or coming in with their car perhaps and dropping it out of their car. But there are bags of garbage there almost daily, and most of them are ripped up from the animals.
Patrick, Patrick, any thoughts? Jenny, any thoughts? Let's go with Patrick.
I sure like Jenny's idea about the sign and the map. I think we could probably do that very quickly and just get it up there. I can have something produced at the graphics factory. So I'm willing to go forward right away on that. If and hopefully that'll make a bit of a difference. But I do think, this is the tip of the iceberg. As our guys are cleaning it up now. I'm more worried about going forward, how we're going to deal with this issue, because it's going to be a constant and it's not going to go away. And it's John's right. It's going to be toilets. It's going to be all kinds of things. So we need a strategy to deal with what's effectively being used as a public asset, to make sure that the cost burden doesn't just fall on the single business. That's all.
So Patrick, if I can be, bold, candid, is there any way at all that the dock, the business, could provide that bin ASAP? Because John makes a valid point that while we're discussing this, the problem exists. Is there any way that you can cover the costs for August and September, which is going to be the bulk of the challenge for the community, which would then allow staff working with you to come back with viable options that would allow us to, as a committee, make recommendations to the board and form part of our budget discussions, albeit it's not till 2025, but and I don't want to suggest that there's bureaucracy at play here, but there's a process in place with respect to expenditures. So I'll throw that out to you, Patrick, and see what your thoughts are, and then I'll turn it over to Jenny for her thoughts on option A and option B. So go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, no, Bob, I have no trouble putting something up and living through the season. So we'll go ahead and do that right away. Again, I'm looking for a long-term solution. So whatever works. We don't want to burden the taxpayer either.
You're still
a bit. We don't want to be subsidizing the tourists. So that's kind of the way I look at this.
Well, that's you were a little bit broken there, but we got the gist of it. That you're prepared to move forward to help out the situation. You're looking for a long-term solution, which I think we all agree, and we're all cognizant of the taxation. Over to you, Jenny, for a wrap up then.
Yeah, I think that's great. And obviously this is something we want to help you guys solve. And just a thought, a dumpster is a challenging thing and a costly thing to Waste Management is servicing at the moment. We're probably changing waste haulers soon. Even if you just went with like cans, like household cans, and then throw them in the back of the truck, you could take them to the east side. And with a lot of signage, that kind of stuff saying, not for public dump off, please go to the east side. So even though the dumpster's there, you're encouraging people not to use it, but then also having it there might be just a short-term stopgap, which has the minimal costs to you for the short term.
Yeah, we'll go ahead with that.
Excellent conversation. And as chair, I have failed you because we're well over 10 minutes. And I should have come back, but I think we would all agree that we had great discussion. We've got a short-term solution, and I appreciate that, Patrick. And of course, I know that we've just added some work on to staff. So I am looking for the committee to agree to the resolution Can you read that resolution out again, Jenny, that you articulated so well a few minutes ago?
That the committee directs staff to create a report to investigate options for expanding service for the East Side Dock for solid waste.
Perfect. Would someone move that resolution, please? By Lisa and seconded by John Jack, all in favor of that resolution going forward. And that's passed. Thank you very much. Patrick, thank you for joining us this evening and, finding a way forward. I'd like to go to item number 5B. Brandon, thank you so much for your patience. And I'll turn it over to you towards the Bamfield submarine water main update.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And good evening again through the chair to everyone. Again, my name is Brandon Powers. I'm a civil engineer with Great Pacific Consulting. And we're working with staff on the replacement of the existing submarine water main providing water service to West Bamfield. So just have a little bit of a hopefully brief update here today by means of a slideshow. And just if you bear with me, I'll see if I can get that shared. Does everyone see a blue PowerPoint right now?
Absolutely, it looks great.
Perfect. So just maybe a little bit of a background refresher on this line. So currently West Bamfield serviced by a 6-inch sclare pipe, which is a high-density polyethylene plastic pipeline, which goes underneath Bamfield Inlet. It was installed about 1980, so it's getting quite old at this point. There's been numerous leaks and recently required repairs, including, I understand, a new one, which sprung up last week. The existing pipe is potentially underrated for the pressure that it experiences, according to some historical reporting on this line, which we are confirming through some modeling at this point. And the pipe itself is not compliant with the current standards of underwater water main engineering. Given that it was installed in the 80s, the contemporary practice has changed. A water main laid on the seabed is not as highly regarded as it or looked upon as being acceptable as it was at the time of this particular installation. So as part of this project, we are looking at replacing this water main with a new pipeline, which would be consistent with current marine pipeline practices to ensure a robust and resilient supply of potable water to West Bamfield. So at this time, it's a bit of where we're at with our project progression. So we have completed our field surveys on this project. This included survey of the ocean inlet as well as the on-land landfalls. We've completed an environmental assessment. We've done remote sensing of the seabed via sonar scanning. And as well, we've been collecting or have collected video via submersible ROV and drones. We have completed our preliminary design and we are initiating our discussions with the permitting agencies, which I'll touch on in a moment. The district has also been undertaking Indigenous consultation with the local First Nations, and a letter of support for this project has at this time been received. A little bit on permitting. So appreciate that marine pipelines are quite permitting intensive process involving a number of different agencies. This particular project is going to be requiring approvals through MOTI, Transport Canada, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the local health authority, as well as the Federal Impacts Assessment Agency. And so, unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as just making an installation of a new pipeline. There are quite a bit of agencies which do need to be dealt with. One maybe particular facet which we have discovered in this area and for this project is that there are some environmentally significant species or habitats in this area that this pipeline will be crossing. And so we do envision that the environmental permitting through DFO will be going through a more intensive review, and there may potentially be some compensation requirements associated with this project as well, given the anticipated potential disruption to some of this environment. A little bit of a design summary as to what this new pipeline is going to be looking like. So the new pipeline is going to be following the existing alignment of the current pipeline. So it will be placed in a Crown land tenure, which the district already has ownership to or has usage rights to. The pipeline will be a larger diameter pipe for some additional capacity, and we'll be incorporating more modern and robust materials than the existing pipe that's currently installed. Notably, we will be burying this pipe, which the existing pipeline is not. You can actually see on that right-hand little image there, that's a sonar scan of the seabed. And I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but kind of right through the middle of that screen, you can see the pipeline lying on the seabed, and we will be endeavoring to get that thing buried for additional protection. And then also in line with current standards for these kinds of crossing, we will be providing some chambers for testing, metering, and isolation on both sides of the landfall, which the district has requested that we also include some flow meters on both sides to have a robust method of detecting any leakage. To provide a little bit of an overview on construction, so these pipelines will typically be sunk in a method using a method that's known as the float and sink method. Essentially, the pipe is filled with air and floated into position, and then filled with water. And once it's filled with water, it becomes negatively buoyant to sink to the seabed. During this construction process, navigation through the inlet would be maintained, with the small exception of the day that the pipe is actually sunk to the bottom. Typically, we would anticipate an interruption to navigation through the inlet on this day on the order of a few hours. The pipeline will connect onto existing pipes located on Newtatch Road, as well as at Mills Landing. And then in terms of timing for when this can occur, the nature of this construction is best suited to the lowest tides of the year. Ideally, this time would be in June or July of 2025. Bamfield is a little bit unique in its tidal characteristics, that there is some additional flexibility that some areas of the province don't have. If we're looking on a project in Vancouver, for example, the tidal restraints or constraints are a little bit more rigid. Bamfield, however, actually has some good tides on the shoulder seasons of this. So there is actually some good tides in kind of the May, April window that we could potentially get this installed a little bit earlier. And I understand that there is some high importance to the replacement of this line, and so would like to stress that we are going to be doing whatever we can to expedite the permitting, design, and eventual construction processes of this line to try to get this in as soon as we can. And so in terms of next steps, we're going to be continuing on with our design and the permitting progression. At the approximately 50-60% design milestone, we're actually going to be getting in touch with some contractors through a negotiated form of proposal, and involving a selected contractor within the later phases of the design process to realize some efficiencies for cost and potential methodologies. And again, targeting to construction by summer 2025, recognizing that the sooner that we can get that new pipeline installed, the better. And so that's hopefully a somewhat brief little update of where this project is at. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try my best to answer them.
Great PowerPoint. Very, very helpful. Thank you. If you can stop sharing your screen, then we can go to questions. Any questions from the committee? Come on, Christine, I'm counting on you.
No questions, but it's great to have an update. And it sounds like things are going as fast as they can, which is awesome.
Thanks, Christine, for that. It's a great segue into my question, talking about speed. I'm still concerned when I see summer of 2025. The other day when I got a call from a diver saying that they were going out to look at this leak, and I'm thinking, oh, one of the highest peak season, and never mind if we lose the water, even a water boil advisory would be a real challenge for the west side. So, I appreciate the work that you're doing, Brandon. I still remain concerned, and I get it with the tidal situation, but anyway, I'm concerned that we say summer as opposed to early spring, but that's just an offhanded comment. Anything else on that committee? Then final wrap up, Jenny, on this. Anything from staff that you'd like to share? No. Very good. Brandon, again, I thank you for sticking with us and your patience. Great report. Jenny, we may want Brandon to share that PowerPoint, if it's all right, with Bamfield Community Affairs or portions of it. That would be helpful for the rest of the community to understand the amount of work that's going into this to do it properly. So thank you again, Brandon.
Yeah, not a problem. Happy to share a little bit on what we've been working on. And Jenny, I believe I have your email address. I can send you that report or that PowerPoint.
Super, thank you. All right, committee, we'll go on to item number 7A, request for decision. So 7A, request for decision, proposed West Bamfield sewer referendum questions and synopsis. And are you kicking this off, Jenny?
I'll be speaking to them.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yes, so we do have the proposed West Bamfield sewer referendum questions and synopsis, and they have been separated into the East and West Bamfield, as was previously discussed, as one may want to move forward and the other may not, or however it may work, but that was decided that it would be best to separate the two. So November 23rd, 2022, the Board of Directors, the following resolution was passed. That the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors support proceeding with a service assent process for the implementation of a liquid waste connection service for the community of Bamfield. And on the July 24th Board of Directors meeting, the Board of Directors provided 3 readings to both of the bylaws for each, both the West and East. The next step is to review the referendum questions, and we are hoping to provide a report to the Board of Directors at their next meeting on August 28th. So we thought it was best to bring it to the Bamfield Area Services Committee for any input or feedback that they would like to provide to the questions. They are very similar, with, of course, the difference in costs that was discussed. And yeah, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Cynthia. I will open it up to the committee. Go ahead, John.
No, it's all very good. I had one concern in the paragraph. It's both the East and the West in the paragraph regarding financial. There's one sentence there that may end up being a little confusing, where it says that the grant funding is not obtained and construction started within 5 years of the date of adoption of the loan authorization bylaw, then the bylaw expires and new public asset process must be conducted. I understand that because I've been involved with it. The first part of the sentence where it says the grant funding, if the grant funding is not obtained and construction started within 5 years of the date, maybe that should be punctuated or slightly modified. Maybe it's just the way I'm reading it.
Thanks, John. Before I go to Bob Schmidt, Jenny or Cynthia, do you have any comments regarding John's points?
I'll have to check with Terry on that, but this was what was included to the board of directors as well. And just so that people understand, that based on the engagement that was to date, that grant funding would need to be secured prior to construction. And then if we did not secure that grant funding and 5 years passed, then we would need to begin the ascent process over again. Am I correct, Jenny?
Yeah, and I'm
I
just,
totally understand what it is supposed to mean. I totally
Oh.
get that. Maybe it's just the way I'm reading it.
oh, and actually, so I just jumped to it because we've got both the questions and then the synopsis.
Mhm.
So when you were going through it, I was reading the questions. So I actually was having a hard time following your critique on the synopsis, John. And are you suggesting a comma be added for clarity?
Well, it sounds as though, depending on how one might be thinking and reading, it sounds as though if the grant money is not attained, but the construction is started within 5 years, well, the construction would not be started, right? It's
But the sentence that you're pointing out, that's under the actual report itself, is it not?
yes.
Yeah, and so that report is not going to the community. So we have, in the referendum process, we have our own materials, and we have to make sure that we aren't, biased in any way, that we're only providing the information. And so what we're looking for feedback on specifically is on the draft referendum questions and the synopsis that are provided following the report.
I understand. Excuse me.
Thank you. Bob Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a couple comments about the referendum questions themselves. I've attended I've read all the materials and I've attended all the open houses and everything like that. So I think I'm fairly on top of it, but I've been somewhat disappointed with the number of people that have been attending. No fault to Jenny. She's provided ample opportunity for people to attend and inform themselves. Unfortunately, we seem to be getting about the same 12 to 15 people showing up at all of them. Partially in light of that, I think a key consideration for anybody voting on this is what the capital contribution will be per parcel for the next 20 years. And while in the report, it's caps it at $1,500 per parcel per annum over 20 years, that is not in the referendum question itself, which is, I think, a key piece of information. So I throw that into consideration, whether that should be part of the question, because it also clearly caps what that contribution will be. Now, there's a reason for not putting it. Secondly, I think it would be very useful, although most people are very familiar what constitutes West Bamfield and East Bamfield. In this particular case, East Bamfield does not include South Bamfield Road or Grappler Inlet. And so I think somebody voting should be able to look at the map that was attached to, I think, the bylaws, the previous bylaws that were approved on July 24th, outlining exactly what East Bamfield and West Bamfield constitutes. And I think it would be a good idea, just a suggestion, a good idea to include the schedule that was attached to the actual referendum question. So it's clear, someone looks at that who's voting is what the area they're voting on behalf of. So anyways, I just throw those out for consideration.
Go ahead, Jenny, and yeah, please.
So really great points, Bob. And it is interesting because we are so restricted in the way we can talk about the questions and how we have to word them financially due to the regulations. So one way that we're going to try to continue to communicate, because we've tried to make this very easy for people to understand, what will this cost you, right? Like, what's it going to look at? No more than 1,500. And that's actually what it is calculated out as, but we do it as 2.208 per thousand of net taxable value, right? Yeah. And that's our upper limit. So the plan is to do another open house and a virtual open house in September, and we're doing a mail out as well. And that mail out is where we want to include, again, the map of the service areas. These are the 2 service areas. And depending on what your property is, you'll just get the one for your, service area that's being proposed. You'll get the explanation again, really clear, $1,500 per year, and you'll get the dates that we're going to be having the referendum. So we'll do that again as a reiteration. It'll be the package. And I could ask Cynthia or Eddie, maybe trying to remember because we're actually posting the questions. We have to post the questions. And I don't know if we would be putting the questions in the mail out package. We might be doing that as well with the synopsis so that people will have them ahead of time. But it is almost a parallel process. Like this is this very legislated question, and this is what it actually means and how we're trying to explain what this service and what this would look like for you in person. So hopefully that I'm hearing all of that feedback, and we're trying really hard to basically reflect that and do that in the next steps coming forward.
Thanks, Jenny. Did that answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, I suspect as much for the financial implications. What about attaching schedule clearly, which clearly outlines what constitutes West Bamfield and East Bamfield, such as that is attached to the respective bylaws?
Yeah, we will definitely have the map included, because that's part of what the service establishing bylaws will include, is that map as well. So yeah, absolutely.
So it just there's so much been going on with, as Bob alluded to and Jenny knows, and I might have missed it in a report or something was said, but so East Bam, I'll just use Bob back at East Bamfield. I'm in that catchment area, but if you are living in Grappler, if you own a home in Grappler, then you don't vote or can't vote for the east side catchment area. Is that correct?
Well, you say grappler as though it's just one spot. So it depends if you're within the boundary. So on Grappler Road, there will be some properties, I believe, that are on that. Is that right? Grappler Road is still within the water service area at that edge, like when you go down past the water treatment plant, because that is within the proposed east side area, but not like any of the island properties in the Grappler Inlet, but there is stuff on the edge of Grappler Inlet, and we'll pull up the map.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
And I think that the point is really good, Bobby, too, because I think that hopefully everyone will show up to try and vote. And we're going to have maps there, and we'll ask people what their property address is. And we'll say, oh, yes, you are in the proposed service area, or no, you're not, and you're on West Side. So we've gotten some pretty good systems to try and run elections and referendums without people confused on where they live. So I hope we'll have something. I hope we won't have any mistakes on that.
Okay. Okay. If I missed anyone else with respect to questions or comments?
I would just add, echo Bob Schmidt's comments about the financial component in the question 1. In each of those is really confusing. And so like the way it is laid out in the briefing here, including the component around what the actual costs are estimated for an individual landowner, really, like, that speaks to me, and this other piece is really unclear. It's not unclear just because someone's left to do the calculation there, but it's also unclear to me in part because it's talking about the annual requisition, which is the annual requisition from the entire service area. But then when it talks about the calculation of so many dollars per $1,000 of net taxable value of land, I get confused about whether that's talking about each individual property owner or the taxable land within the entire area. So I understand your hands might be tied by through the regs that you have to follow, but I think this will definitely require some good communication right alongside anyone that's going to vote.
And we will follow, like, Terry did review the report and the questions. However, she is on vacation right now, and she did have a good conversation with Wendy Thompson, the previous general manager of administrative services. She is assisting us with the referendum process. Unfortunately, she's just not here to speak to their discussion, but I know she would have some more information to share about that, because I know she was back and forth on the questions and what wording to use. And I know there was reasoning behind the choice in wording, but just, yeah, she'll hopefully she'll be able to speak to that to provide clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate that. I also, I'm not sure how clear this is in the other materials, but in the briefing here in both for East and West Bamfield, it describes 9.5 million required for grant funding, and it's unclear whether that's per service area or for the entire project. Should both go ahead?
And for clarity, that'll be per service area.
So let me direct my question to both Christine and Bob, given your earlier comments about the question. Are you comfortable enough knowing that staff are going to have additional information for the community to make motion, or A and B, because this is going to the board, and I'm going to be following the recommendations of this committee, and I want to make sure that I've got this committee's support with whatever direction we wish to give staff on this, recognizing the parameters of the legislation.
Well, if I can jump in, I guess my preference is that it be clear in the actual question, the idea of what, a value or whatever per 1,000 net taxable value. Somebody voting on that, it won't mean anything. If somebody's informed themselves and is aware of, that it's going to be a maximum of $1,500 per parcel, which we've been told, it makes it's a key consideration, pro or con. Now, if your hands are tied because the legislation or the regulations, it is perhaps what it is. And I think, Jenny, all you can do is try to inform people. They don't want to read, they don't want to, but I just don't like having some kind of ambiguity and uncertainty in a question as important as that. And it is what it is, perhaps. The second, it looks like the second issue I had, attaching the map, that's pretty straightforward, and I think that's helpful. And then it also made it clear who can't vote if somebody from South Bamfield Road shows up. Well, they're not entitled to vote because they're not part of the proposed service area. But I just probably more for people who haven't informed themselves. People haven't informed themselves. So are they going to vote? Well, I guess it happens in elections as well. So I still have some misgivings about that, but it is what it is. If that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. But I would have preferred something much clearer. I guess it holds the ACRD accountable for fulfilling those obligations, but also informs the public before they make a decision on to vote pro or con. What's it going to cost them per year, capital costs? Of course, then there's operating costs and everything else still. But that's sort of a key component. So I don't know if I answered your question, Bob, in a long, rambling way, but I can live with it if that's the requirement. If there was an ability to make it clear, I would support that as well. But
I happen to agree with you, Bob. Christine, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do feel like if it's possible to add something in about the maximum amount that can come from each parcel, for at least for the loan repayment. I understand it being difficult and we can't commit at this point to what the ongoing operational costs are. But I think that's if the commitment is being made that there's a maximum amount for one component, I think that should fit right in the bylaw itself, or the referendum question.
Thanks, Christine. I would agree.
And-
Back
and-
to you, Bob.
Just
likely-
a quick suggestion. Is it possible, maybe this isn't, but right after that figure to put in brackets, a maximum of $1,500 per parcel per annum or something like that. That adds some clarity. Whether it fits the legislative regime, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you and Jenny and everyone else, but it would provide a lot of clarity in my view, at least.
Mhm. And that's essentially what I'm recommending, Bob. You may, for clarity, have to state in there that that does not include the operational costs of the other amount so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. I know this is getting really fun for you, Cynthia and Jenny.
I'm wondering if the proposed recommendation could be amended to, instead of saying as presented, we put following clarification with the chief financial officer on the, I'm just wondering how to word the funding part.
I kind of know what Terry's going to say. I've been haggling with her about these questions and the finance component quite a bit because we've been doing all of this engagement and like she's been working to the criteria that we've set, right? Which is maximum $1,500 with 90% funding. And she's taken the information that we've all agreed upon and has converted it into this very strict regulations and requirements. I'm not like, I love those suggestions and I'm going to bring them to her because I love hassling her and saying, what about this? Can we put, $1,500 per parcel in the brackets? So I think I would like to say we will try again. And I think this is really good feedback and why we brought this to you. We want to hear this. We are also still concerned about confusion and trying every which way to reduce that, to make this as simple as possible so people are making a really informed decision. But I also just want to give a caveat that from what I've heard, that there's probably little ability to tweak this just in order to very explicitly meet the financial requirements.
Go ahead, Bob.
Sorry, not to belabor this anymore, but just one potential suggestion is to have an asterisk at that point in time and have an asterisk below as a point for a sort of a footnote. This is, constitutes $1,500 per annum per parcel, whatever conditions or limitations, capital contribution, whatever you want to put, that clarifies that. So at least somebody in the voting booth has that information, but I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out whether that's feasible or not.
Heck, Bob, I was going to suggest we just make the changes and beg for forgiveness. Christine, and then I'll go to John.
Sure. Thanks for taking these forward, Jenny and Cynthia. We'll see how far we can get. If we have one of these meetings prior to the assent vote, I think it would be useful for this group to review the materials that will be sent out or that will be in the room, so that we can see how those supporting documents and how whatever components of this needs to be shunted to those materials, that we can have eyes on that in advance and make sure that's making sense. Not sure if the timeline allows.
Good point, Christine. John.
So in the Hawaiian world, we've passed recommendations that kind of allow staff to determine whether or not the recommendation actually is possible from a legal perspective. Is that something that we could incorporate into our recommendation? I was trying to listen as I ran to the washroom and back, and it sounded like there was a sentiment that we should try to put in as much information as possible into the question, and I just don't know the answer as to whether or not that's acceptable or given a bunch of definitions for neutrality and all that sort of thing. But that being said, if it can happen, I think it's something that we should recommend that would be looked at, but then we would have to kind of let go of what that exact wording may look like, because we're not going to be able to determine that here. But if we have the faith that the staff will figure that out, make a recommendation based on figuring that out, and then the board can go, yep, that's okay, or no, let's stick with this. then that might matter. And it sounds like it would be maybe not a board decision. Would that be a whole board or would that be an EA director decision? I cannot remember.
I believe the board passes the motion for these questions.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So what we could do then is have those, when we provide the report to the board, as options considered, and highlighting the recommended changes from the committee as an option considered, and then staff can speak to what the findings were on the clarification around that, and if we are able to make those changes.
Go ahead, John.
So the other thing we could do is pass it as is, but then in a separate motion that it doesn't have to be as precise. Kind of recommend that we had this discussion according to the minutes, and staff will bring forward recommendations as a result, just so that if this committee recommends something to that degree and does so wholeheartedly, but maybe cannot do so from an official perspective because we can't just word it, we don't know what the official legal wording would be, then at least we covered off in those two motions, right, for this decision, and then likely for the East Bamfield decision. I just want to make sure that it's captured because there's a lot of good conversation going on here, and I don't know the legal ways to incorporate those considerations in. But if we can't do rules as written, then we can do rules as intended, right? So as best we can. I don't know how other people feel about that.
So what I'm hearing for me, referendums for dummies, is that we would like to try to see if Terry and staff can tweak the referendum question. If they can't, then at the very least, we would want staff to bring back clarification for us to consider, and that clarification would be available to the public ahead of the referendum, so that it would provide some clarification on costs and other matters as alluded to in the referendum. Is that concise enough, or does that sum up what we're hoping for? I see a thumbs up from Bob. Okay, so, and then based on John's good comments, what does the two motions A and B need to say so that we can continue to move forward and give direction to staff? And I'm looking to Jenny for that, or sorry, Cynthia as well.
I'll let Cynthia take a recommendation on or a stab at an additional recommendation. I like John's suggestion of the passing the two motions as stand, and then maybe adding one more motion that asks that staff consider the suggested changes to incorporate for the recommendations to the board, if possible, and provides materials for review.
Cynthia?
First one I have, it's very simple, very simple change, just by changing the as presented and then as amended, of course, with your recommendations following. And then the second one is where I'm kind of not sure on the wording, but if the proposed amendments cannot be made to the questions, then that staff to provide clarification through options considered to the board. Does that capture it? No.
Go ahead, John.
So I think what we should be doing is passing the motions, because it's two for East and two for West, right? And they're both the same, but leave those as is for now, but then do a motion after the fact, either for each or just after both sets have passed. Let's say there have been some comments from the committee regarding ensuring that certain information can be made available to the best of its ability, either in the voting booth or very close to voting day in communications. I think that's the main swoop of it, right? And so we don't know if that information can be included in the question that's being by the voter. So like the contextual information, right? That may make or break some people's decision making. And that would be up to Jenny and Cynthia and Terry, I assume, in moving forward. So we'll leave the motion as it is for the ones that are recommended in the briefing note, and then just pass one afterwards that says, by the way, we did these things and we think the board should consider them very seriously, if at all possible. So I don't know. So you don't have to do anything to the motions as is, but then we say, please refer to the minutes or the discussion. Staff have taken notes on what it is we've discussed here. Can we recommend a motion that either changes the nature of the question to provide context, or can we do, if that's not possible for some realistic reason, then can we make sure that communications are made to the Bamfield community, east and west, of that context?
And John, are you saying that that would be one motion covering both A and B?
It could. I mean, the parliamentary being careful wants me to do one would want me to do one after each set, just for clarity's sake.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
An extra 3 minutes. So
yeah. Any comments? Go ahead, Christine.
If this committee doesn't pass a motion saying that we support the questions can still go ahead as they are, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way it is now is because the board provided the 3 readings, we now sent it to the ministry for their review. And then once they give us approval of the bylaws, then we have to go ahead with the referendum within 80 days. So
yeah,
we have to follow a very strict timeline.
Yeah, and understood that component. I respect for the creativity we're trying to do here with creating the 2 different motions. I feel like having a motion on record saying that we think these questions are fine when we don't quite think they're fine doesn't make sense to me. And so I would prefer, if there's not a reason not to say that we've considered these questions, and our decision is that we would like to have these other components reflected in the question if possible. And if it's not possible, then we can insert what we've been talking about is the language for motion 2. I'm hesitant to pass a motion that shows support from the committee if the committee's not really feeling like these questions are effective. And my initial question about whether or not essentially it matters whether the committee supports or not is then it would, still doesn't hold up that process that the board has to go through of approving them. But you have a more accurate version of the feedback from this group on file, on record.
So I think I just want to share as the official representative of Bamfield as a board director. If this committee did not concur or agree to the recommended motions, I would be very uncomfortable supporting it at the board table. Because again, where else, I'm getting my not direction. I'm getting great input from this committee. We've created this new service committee for this exact reason, so that I have more confidence moving forward at the board table that my vote is consistent to well thought out discussions regarding these things. So I won't go into any further detail. However, I guess I'm wondering, given that and the only real challenge is trying to get everybody together on a certain date, but could we ask staff to go back at this and reconvene in a week or 2 week? We've had lots of discussions. We don't have to have a lengthy agenda, just a quick 10-minute meeting to move these things forward. So, and Jenny, if you wouldn't mind responding to that thought, please.
Would it be possible to provide a written response back to the members of the committee? And we can post that publicly as well, just in response to the considerations before it goes to the board. Would that be a fair compromise so that once we have a chance to review this, see what we can do, we'll review the feedback and see if we can change it and provide all of that back to you as well, so that we're giving you follow up on what the process was. If we're able to change it, what the suggested changes will be to reflect what you said, and if we can't, why not? And then what we're going to do instead to address the concern for confusion.
Sorry, but you're still wanting us to pass these motions tonight?
I think that we would need to have a committee meeting to pass motions.
Right.
So today, I would suggest that we pass a motion, but I think we would be happy to do follow-up via email. Timing wise and scheduling wise, like we really are on a timeline now. And so the board meeting on the 28th is when we really do have to go to talk about these questions. But that being said, and I don't know if we would be able to set up a committee meeting per se, but I think we could have additional discussion more through correspondence to address this if we needed to. And then that, might elicit, is this okay? And then we might be able to get feedback from the committee for you, Director Beckett, so that then when you're going to the board and the report's being presented, you'll have confidence that it reflects what the committee's in support of or not.
I think that's critical. What you just said is, if we were to pass these motions, I would not be comfortable voting on them given our conversations tonight, unless I had some kind of staff report saying the committee has reviewed the follow-up material and our support of whatever the outcome of that would be. Would that satisfy your concerns, Christine, at that point in time?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not wanting to make it overly complicated. Essentially, if regulations mean that the things that we're asking to be added to the questions is not possible, then I would support you, Bob, with supporting them as presented on behalf of the community.
Okay, knowing if that was the case, that there would be additional information available prior and perhaps in the booth or at the voting station.
Yeah. So everything we've discussed already, but I don't like the idea of having a motion on file from this group saying we think the questions are fine, and then another one saying, well, they're not fine, so we actually would like you to do this other thing. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I guess I just thought the questions are fine because we all know the actual facts and context behind it. Is that we don't think the voters are fine and therefore they need more context. I think that's more the question than anything. Either way, we're going to get to San Francisco, making sure that they're gonna get the information that they need. So however that happens in a way that makes everyone here comfortable is the best way to do it. So that being said, I wouldn't mind respecting the timelines involved. But that being said, if there's a way to refer some information back to the committee members who need to see it, whatever the briefing note that would go to the board would be, and then can give their assent in some way. And then Cynthia or Virginie can say, yep, 5 of the 7 members of the board or whatever got back and said they're okay with how we're presenting this. Because I think that's the real concern, is just making sure that we're not somehow like, we're not asking that these things go forward as they're written and then completely ignore everything the committee is saying, right? Like, it's just demonstrating that activity in whatever way makes sense, without having to play hardball, because I don't think anybody's playing hardball here, right? So, I think we're okay in either way. It's just the timeline involved, as long as people can show up to a committee meeting if it comes to that, but I don't think it will. So I think we're in okay shape. Thanks.
Okay. All right. If that's the case, then, and if there's no other further discussion, I am looking for someone to move motion 7A to start with. And who might do that for us?
I think just from like, we don't require a motion in there. It would have been nice to have a motion, but if the committee does not feel comfortable at this time passing this specific motion, then we can include that in a report that we did have a really good discussion at the committee level, and these questions needed to be answered. And this is what staff went back to look into, and these are the answers we have at this time. We provided this information to the committee members prior to this meeting, and this was the feedback we received. And then some may have supported, or if you did or didn't, we could provide that information in the report. We don't need this specific motion if we don't have it.
Jenny, are you good with that? Because that actually, I think, alleviates a whole lot of angst here and accomplishes the same thing.
I think it's a great plan.
Perfect. So that covers off then staff on 7A and 7B, where we know how we're going to move forward. And I'll be in a much more comfortable position come the 28th of August when requests for decisions are presented to the entire ACRD board. And because we've got the chair of the board with us, you're nodding your head. You think that's going to be good, sir?
Yeah, we may have to have some of this explanatory conversation again, depending on how readable the briefing note is. But I think between you and I and staff, we should be able to cover off how we got to this point and why we're talking about it in that way. And then that should be enough. We just may need to kind of cover off some questions from other board members, but that's pretty much standard fare.
Perfect. Absolutely. Good. I'm very comfortable with that. We can move on to report A, and just as I said to Brandon, Paulo, I appreciate you hanging in till the end, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everybody. I wanted to provide some brief update on where things are at since we last chatted about Bamfield waste hauling. And just as a brief snippet, we had originally looked at options to what we could do to deal with rising costs of waste hauling in that area. As you know, we went through the budget process and we moved forward with the concept of purchasing our own bins as opposed to going to the rental process that we have right now to help alleviate some of those costs. So as a bit of an update, we did complete that procurement piece, and we awarded through the board back in, I believe it was May, to Environmental Metalworks to build and deliver bins to Bamfield, well within the financial budget we had on capital, at a cost of $87,246. That is the cost of having not only the bins to service the Bamfield and Anakla area, but also the ability to have some critical spares, as we've talked ad nauseum about possible expansion in the area, and as well to have a good standard bear resistant bin throughout the community. Whenever anyone sees this bin, they know exactly what it's for. The idea behind all of this, of course, was to bring more haulers to the table. We were always really struggling with getting haulers to bid on such remote areas as what we're dealing with right now. So with that leads to part two. So we've just completed the the procurement process for looking for a waste hauling contract. What I can say is that we're assessing the bids. We did get 2 bids come in, so we're going through that process right now. We closed off the RFP, and we're going to be bringing those bids forward to board for consideration in just 2 short weeks. And with that, there's a brief timeline that I've provided here to let folks know where things are at. So August 28th will be the board award. We expect to have our bins delivered into the Bamfield area and put into storage approximately mid-September. Make sure that's all lined up. We put together communications as we get closer to the end of the existing hauling contract and put that out to residents around mid-October or so. And then the new waste hauling service will begin in December. So folks will see changes in the bins that are sitting out there and a swap out of the new bins that will go into service. Ideally, should be a fairly smooth transition. And aside from that, I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Paula. Any questions for Paula? Paula, when it goes to the board, is this going to be an in-camera discussion regarding the 2 RFPs, given that it's a financial situation or a contract situation?
Good question, and Chair. No, this is going to be in public in an open meeting. It went through a public procurement process, much like the bin award did previously. So you'll see a very public report talking about what the bidders look like, what the prices look like, and here was the recommendation for the successful proponent. So everything will be in the open board agenda.
Thank you. Good work. Thank you, all of your staff and your team. I think this is a good move forward, and with the hope that it will save us some money, and also from a social procurement standpoint, hiring locally and using local businesses. That is important. If there's no questions, if I could have someone move a motion that the Bamfield Area Services Committee receives Paula's report A. Christine, everybody's anxious. So Christine moved, is seconded by Bob. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you again, Paula, for your time this evening. Moving on, I don't believe there's anything under item number 9, late business. Cynthia, any questions or comments from the public?
No, we don't have any questions in Zoom and no questions received by email.
Thank you very much. Nothing for item 11, nothing, no in camera, so number 12 is mute. So a motion to adjourn on, look at the sun coming through on this beautiful, beautiful night, is it? Tuesday night. Motion to adjourn. John, Bob, all in favor? Thank you all, staff. Thank you all, wonderful volunteers. We'll talk to you soon. Take care now. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
I guess I should stop recording, Cynthia. I'm the one in charge of all of this.
I was just going to say, I think